Case, cluster, boom. We're starting to see the explosion of cases all over the world, of course, as predicted. The United States, just a couple of weeks behind everybody else, and we have a crisis within a crisis today, people, because the financial impacts of this and the economic impacts are going to be absolutely legendary. Hello, everyone. I'm Chris Martenson. This is your SARS-CoV-2 update for March 5th, 2020. Titling this one, A Crisis Within a Crisis. This is your honey badger virus update. There is just no stopping this thing. So right to the numbers. First, wow, we are very close to getting to that big magic round number. Not that it means anything, but sometimes people are attracted to that. We're closing in on 100,000 cases. Of course, I think we're way over that mark because I think mainland China has at least an order of magnitude off here, I would bet. I bet you just have to add a zero to pretty much every one of these numbers. That's my guess at this point in time. And lots of people are starting to question what we questioned very recently, which is the numbers coming out of China. We'll take a look at some of that data in just a second. South Korea still very much just cracked the 6,000 mark, very much struggling to contain this thing. And they are doing just a bang-up job, I think, really doing an amazing job of contact tracing and testing and doing everything they need to do to assure that they're catching all the cases they can. Really a model of how to do it well, I think. Italy really struggling with this. I believe there's strong evidence now that Italy and Iran both have a different strain of this virus, a much more virulent, much more deadly strain. Because look at this total recovered compared to in serious critical. Look at the difference between these two numbers right here. We don't know what Iran's numbers are, but as well, look at the deaths here. Half the number of cases is South Korea. Sad, at least 3 times, but closing in on 4 times as many deaths. So there's that. I'm not really clear what's happened. I didn't chase it down, but the Diamond Princess number is falling of number of total cases. So I don't know if people turned out to be actually negative and they thought they were positive. I don't know. I haven't bothered to chase that down. It doesn't seem important right now. Germany, though, boom. Case, cluster. We're at the boom stage for Germany. They're going to be ratcheting up very quickly. And France, same thing here. And look at everybody who's in the 100 club now. It's quite a long list here. And Sweden just about to join with its 42 cases jumping in today. Norway with 29 cases. Netherlands with 44. These will all be in the 100 club by tomorrow. So this is really starting to take off, and we're starting to see the deaths mount and those red numbers everywhere. So I just want to point out something interesting about these ratios really quickly. And I don't know if it's the right way to look at it, but it's starting to give me some sense of what we're looking at here. So let's look at total deaths compared to total recovered. So with 40 deaths in South Korea compared to 135 declared recovered. And again, from yesterday, what's recovered really mean? So if you're recovered but you have permanent fibrotic lung damage, that's not really fully recovered. And sometimes we're seeing people being declared recovered and coming back with a secondary infection maybe, or a second round of this thing. We're not clear yet. The data is still fuzzy around that, but there's enough there to say it's a concerning trend. I don't have enough data to say, is that 1 out of 100 people who's recovered, or is it 50%? We don't know. But if we look at this, we see one thing we can look at is the total deaths compared to total recovered, because I guess you're not in the clear until you're declared recovered. So yes, there are 5,900 active cases in South Korea. They don't have that many serious critical people, but there's only 135 have been declared recovered. So I don't know if a lot of these people could be declared recovered. I don't know any of that yet. But so we're just going to look at a couple of ratios here. 40 divided by 135 gives you this number here of 29.6%. And I think there's something important to compare total deaths compared to total recovered, especially as time goes on. The more time goes on, the more these are going to sort of synthesize and coalesce around a meaningful sort of a ratio. All right, I went too far there. Oh, no, that's fine. I'll start here. So let's look at this. Italy, 148 divided by 414. That gives us this number of 35.7. Maybe the Diamond Princess gives us this has been going on longer than these two. So interesting that we only have 6 deaths here. It used to be 7. I'm still not clear what happened to that 7th one. And now there's 212 declared as recovered. Again, but with a huge, it's been well over a month now, it feels like. I'll have to check when that actually started, but it's been a long time. And there's still 35 in serious critical here, but this is a hopeful number here because that only gives us 2.8%. And if we imagine that there's going to be some settled ratio between the number of people that die and the number of people that recover. We're looking for what is that number, because that's going to be give us a good sense of what the actual case fatality rate is. So maybe it's as low as 2.8%. We don't know. But if we look at China's numbers as given, and again, I don't trust them at all. But if we just want to take them just for comparison's sake, right now, in China's declaring 3,000 total deaths, 52,000 total recovered for a 5.8% rate between those two. So if China had been recording and reporting their numbers accurately, then this would be the number we would be starting to settle on for the overall case fatality rate. And again, there's still a lot of time, a lot of data has to be gathered here. But as we begin to collect data from these other countries, we're going to start to see where those come. This case fatality rate, see where that actually settles. But these numbers concern me quite a bit right here. And as well, I'm, of course, concerned about the people who end up recovered, but not really, because now they have lifelong lung scarring that they have to deal with, which could easily result in a diminished quality and even length of life going on. Lots of new cases. I can't even go through them all. It's so many right now. But perhaps the ones that maybe jumped out at me today is San Francisco. First 2 cases of coronavirus, both the result of community spread. So no travel. They didn't come back from Italy. They didn't come back from China. So San Francisco now has community spread. So we got case going on here right now. I think we all know where that one's going to head. Clusters are next. In New York, looks like we're getting close to the cluster count here. 11 new cases in Westchester County, 2 cases in New York City. Westchester County, that's the Tony County up to the north there, which where a lot of the finance people hang out. I think it just got real for a lot of people in the Wall Street community. And one more piece of data around that too. England, 25 new cases of coronavirus. UK now, over 115. They're in the 100 club. Greece, 21 new cases of coronavirus, total of 31. Of course, Greece is also battling an amazing influx of refugees. These are people that Turkey has been boating over, and they're coming out of a war-torn area. So a lot of these people would be, coming in, I think, in a depleted state in terms of their health. So these would be people who could really be carrying this if the Iranian version of this, which I think is a very bad version, somehow has infected in the refugees and they're coming over. This could be very bad for Greece. And I have no data yet to suggest that any of these refugees have SARS-CoV-2, the honey badger virus in them. I'm just giving you a little presupposition of, listen, Iran is not that far away from that whole circumstance. So if this spreads over, that's bad. Now here's, I think, very alarming. West Bank is a very overpopulated area. And of course, they have terrible medical conditions inside the West Bank in terms of having been under such severe restrictions for such a long time. Feels like an ideal place for something like coronavirus to spread. And don't know anything about the type of virus that they've got here. I really, really want to start seeing more aggressive genotyping so we can start to look at the phylogeny, the family trees of these things. Because I think it's important. I think seeing what Iran has, what Italy has, comparing it to, say, what South Korea has, that's all going to be really important. And we need more and more of that genotyping to find out which versions of this thing are worse and compare those to the clinical outcomes. But seeing first 7 cases in Palestine feels to me almost like they're going to just jump the case thing and go straight to clusters, and where that goes after that as well. Here, this is in Ireland. A case of coronavirus has been detected for the first time in a patient who had not traveled overseas. So this is in Cork. Somebody contracted the virus, but they'd not been to northern Italy in recent weeks. In fact, they hadn't been in any contact with any existing known cases. This raises the specter of community spread of the virus. No, it doesn't. It confirms that community spread has happened. So, and this is really important here. One health source indicated the latest case may indicate that the virus has been undetected within the community in Ireland for some time before the first case was confirmed. That's something that we are seeing more and more of, which is that it appears to circulate undetected. I have been reading case after case, and the Bloomberg today was recording recording the words and reporting the words of a Chinese doctor who was really sounded like they were giving us the CCP, the official Chinese Communist Party version, saying that there really isn't any evidence that this thing spreads asymptomatically. I've seen health officials from various countries in Europe say the same thing. And how do you get these undetected circulations before the first cases? And we're seeing that all over the place. This is just the latest place where we see that behavior. And we have a lot of data besides, which really confirms the idea that you do get that undetected / asymptomatic spreading. I'm not sure why that's being questioned. I think, is it to limit the fear around this? Is that a scarier thing? Of course it is. Asymptomatic spreading is something that's really not good and makes this very hard to detect and makes me personally want to dial back my exposure from people, no matter how healthy they seem. Remember, the disease progression here is just case, cluster, cluster, boom, right? This is where we see everything going. Thanks, Ben Hunt, for that again. All right. This is a nice this is a chart and comes from Ken Stanfield. You see him right there at Stanfield Ken. He's got some great charts. He's been putting them up daily out there on Twitter. So look here first. Let's look at this is Inner Mongolia here in the black, and Mongolia is doing a great job containing their virus. They're just really they were one of the first countries. They shut down their border with China way back when, and was one of the first countries to do that, and just said nope, not coming here. Singapore, you can see they've just been doing just a fantastic job, and maybe they're helped by the fact that they have warm weather there, and that could be a pretty strong factor around that. Hong Kong, very interesting. I would have expected more cases in Hong Kong, but it looks like whatever they're doing is working for them as well. So there are countries that can manage this, but you have to. They all tend to be a little bit smaller, and they all tend to have very, very aggressive contact tracing and very aggressive responses by their health authorities, with the full authority of the government behind them. Meanwhile, the so-called Western countries, not so-called, but I mean the so-called developed countries with their Western attitudes, a little bit more libertarian, a little bit more freewheeling, and a little bit slower. All the health authorities have just been ridiculously slow. And here you're seeing the case, this is case, cluster, boom, right? Case, cluster, boom, right? All of these on those exponential upticks, and all through here, all the countries are telling themselves we're doing fine. You get all these reassuring words from all your health ministers and everything. Right around here is where, no surprise, right, where they started talking about how face masks were bad for us to use because they might harm us, right? And if we carry on, we'll notice, these are just in the hundreds of cases, but this is what it looks like when you go further, and this is South Korea with its thousands of cases, and Italy would have a similar looking chart. So all of these countries are on their way to this chart. They just happen to be a few weeks behind, U.S. included right here, of course. All right, India. Remember we had the case yesterday. We talked about that techie who went on a bus ride and then showed up with symptoms, and 36 of the 88 people that were in contact with this techie are showing symptoms. So this is from today, March 5th. That's not a good sign. And of course, these people could just be showing symptoms, and maybe they're all hypochondriacs like I might be if I just knew I was on a bus with a guy who tested positive for coronavirus. But and none of these people have, to my knowledge, have yet been tested positive. But it's not a good sign that there are 36 of them are showing symptoms. So certainly some of them are actually negative, but maybe a few of them are positive. Very worried about how this is progressing and spreading through India. So remember yesterday I talked about how the government shuts down export of 26 APIs, and those are active pharmaceutical ingredients due to coronavirus. That's what we said yesterday. That's March 3rd. That created a bit of a kerfuffle, and so on March 4th, they came out and revised that a little bit here. So the Secretary of India's Department of Pharmaceuticals came out to remind everybody that was not a ban. There is no ban. It's only a temporary restriction of a few APIs. Okay, we're getting a little weaselly. I'm not totally clear what this means yet. They, presumably manufacturers, can export after getting permission of the Directorate General of Foreign Trade. There's no information here as to, has anybody gotten permission? Has anybody sought permission? Has permission been granted? We don't know any of that. The national president of the Indian Drug Manufacturers Association also doesn't see any reason to panic because of the latest developments. Why do they always just go straight to panic? It's like either you're completely unaware and ignorant or you're panicking. As soon as they tell me there's no reason to panic, that's when I start to get a little uncomfortable, maybe panicky. All right. Trying to clarify here, it's only a restriction, not a ban. If companies need to export, they just need to report it to the authorities and follow the formalities. Again, sounds very bureaucratic, and will any of these formalities lead to somebody being allowed to export anything? I don't know, because I think India's looking at two things. The growth in cases and being very worried about that, and rightly, and wanting to preserve for its own people its manufactured products that could be helpful in treating this as well. They know the true situation of what they are or are not getting from China in terms of the key ingredients. All right. So media coverage, they're catching on slowly. This just saw this. Tom Cotton, a senator, he wrote here, tweeted out, at Barron's Online discovered that the official number of Chinese coronavirus deaths could be predicted using a simple mathematical formula. That just doesn't happen in nature. They're cooking their books. So that's fantastic that he came up with that and cited Barron's Online. The problem is that we reported this on February 5th, and we were citing a February 2nd a chart that had been put out by EV Defender, Event Horizon here. And this is a link to this chart, which comes from the February 5th YouTube update that I put out. So this was actually discovered out there in the Twitterverse on February 2nd. Here it is March 4th, and Barron's Online is being credited for that. I'm a big credit nut. I think credit should go where it's deserved and where it's due. It's just a little frustrating to see big online media ignore this, belittle this, resist it, and then claim credit for these things, which they probably caught on Twitter off of the smarter people out there who were in front of this. All right, unconfirmed. This is unconfirmed, but this just came out on NTD, and just here's why it's unconfirmed for me. New Tang Dynasty Television is founded by Falun Gong. Falun Gong is a religious, a belief-oriented group of people, I should say, in China who've been very heavily persecuted by the Chinese government. So they may well have a bone to pick. And often I look at the NTD TV stuff, and they've been out in front of a lot of things. But I just want to throw that shaker of salt out there just so you're aware of this. But here's the rumor, or the unconfirmed report that came out, which says that on March 5th, flights from Guangzhou, Shenzhen to Beijing, Shanghai, and Hangzhou were canceled. A lot of flights. So some mainland netizens broke the news that the airline sent a text message in the middle of the night to notify that the reason for the cancellation was public safety reasons. Staff also revealed that it was related to the outbreak of the Wuhan pneumonia, new crown pneumonia. That's interesting. New coronavirus. Okay. Pinsong.com issued a document on March 5th stating that the second outbreak has begun, ? The flights from Shenzhen to Guangzhou have been canceled due to public safety reasons. All right. I've also received a number of other unconfirmed reports, meaning people have tweeted to me and sent me emails saying specifically in this region here, in Guangzhou, that there is another problem and that there's another outbreak. So this could be that China tried to get back to work, put some people back to work, and things broke back out again. To me, it's absolutely unthinkable that China would report a total of 80,000 cases, which is a fraction of a % of their total population, with something that is spreading so virulently that you might see 36 of 88 people who had contact with somebody catch it in this case, but in China's case, when it was uncontained for weeks and weeks, it really only hit a fraction of a % of their people. Doesn't pass the sniff test. All right, so this was a pretty interesting exchange. I think the United States is really going to have a lot of self-inflicted wounds, and I thought this exchange was pretty telling. Let's listen in.
We'll work to keep it there.
Thank you. Guidance for the uninsured. Can the uninsured get tested? Gentlemen, ladies, can the uninsured get tested?
Scream into the camera, they're going to get you anywhere.
Well, how about answering the question?
We would like an answer to that question.
That's a valid question. Could you answer it?
We'll We'll work to
All
keep it
right.
there.
So that was pretty interesting, right? Can the uninsured get tested? Can the uninsured get tested? No, and then just screaming back. Screaming for the camera can't get you anywhere, right? So this is the state of things in the United States. It's a very simple question. It deserves to be answered, because if the uninsured can't even get tested, because if you're uninsured, the hospital's like, well, who's paying for this? And they're not going to want to run expensive tests if you can't pay for it. And the uninsured don't want to incur the bills for this because it could be thousands of dollars. Because what if you get tested and they say, we'll pay for a coronavirus test, but if it comes back negative, then what happens then? Do you have to foot the bill? I mean, a lot of unanswered questions, and obviously officials are really flat-footed on this response. It would be, excuse me, that they should be able to answer these questions by now, and they should have definitive answers for this. Taiwan has a positive answer for this. Yes, of course, they're going to pay for all the testing. South Korea, yes, they're going to pay for all the testing. Singapore, yes, all the testing. Also, the hospital bills if you get hospitalized around this. And in most cases if you get quarantined, they're going to help make up your lost income. All things you need to do if your goal is to get people tested so that you can do aggressive contact tracing so that you in your country can enjoy a nice flat progression of cases like this rather than one of those that looks like that. That's what's needed. And of course, that's not coming. And now that I seem to have these videos running, let's go back. I couldn't get this one to play yesterday, so let's see if I can get it to play today. This is also, I believe, pretty telling.
You may have seen some coverage about a shortage of masks in different environments, in different communities. Right now in Utah, and definitely within Intermountain, we do not have a shortage of masks. We have them aplenty. But keep in mind, we don't recommend wearing masks in the community. We are not at that point yet. In fact, there is some recent data to suggest that there's potentially higher risk for people that wear masks. If you're touching the masks and manipulating the mask, you're also touching your face. So we don't recommend that at this time.
Don't recommend this at this time. In fact, I have data that shows that wearing masks does help. And our user at our site, Dave Fairtex, did find a study and posted it, which showed that people who wore face masks in their homes, and they did a study where the people who had other family members who had flu in the home, some people would wear face masks. Some people said they were going to, but were non-compliant, and other people didn't wear face masks at all. And then they studied them and said who got sick. And it turned out that if you were compliant, you wore the mask, and you were diligent about that, you had an 80% reduction in your contracting of viral influenza. Okay, so there is data to show that. I have not seen any data to show that it's not helpful. And of course, using a face mask couldn't be simpler. Let's spend a minute figuring that out.
Sam's patient has an upper respiratory infection. Sam knows what to do. Sam puts on a mask and enters the room.
That's what he was talking about. Don't do that.
Sam? Sam performs hand hygiene. Sam secures her mask either with ties or by placing elastic ear loops around her ears. She fits the flexible band to her nose bridge, making sure it is snug to her face and below her chin. Sam knows her front of her mask is contaminated. Sam performs hand hygiene. Instead of touching the mask, she grasps the ties or elastics of the mask, carefully removing the mask without touching the front. Sam discards the mask in the waste container. Sam performs hand hygiene. Great job, Sam.
There. That wasn't so hard, was it? That's it. That's all that's required to teach people how to use masks appropriately. And it must just be really embarrassing. I think I would be embarrassed if I was in this person's position, citing research that I couldn't find saying that it's worse than nothing, and that it's dangerous for people to do this because they can't figure out how to do it when it's honestly not all that hard. All right. Remember, all the balancing act that has to happen here is, and this is really going to be very, very tricky for the officials. And believe me, I have a lot of sympathy for what they need to do here in terms of stopping the pandemic as one action. Of course, you got to get that R0 below 1.0. And you got to use these non-pharmaceutical interventions or NPIs, really tight containment, all these isolation actions, shutting schools down, halting all large gatherings, reminding, people to not, shake hands, do greeting, kiss, hugs, all that stuff, right? You got to balance that against keeping the economy going. And of course, this is going to be a really big deal, especially in a country like ours in the United States over here, or many other countries that are really over the tips of their skis in terms of having just enormous amounts of debt and leverage and things like that, because you either keep all of that debt economy humming or it threatens to crash just like it did in 2008. So I get the sensitivity there. And of course, you never want your infection to get to a level that swamps your hospital systems to the point that they can't operate, which means, as we all know, hospitals are already in many places already at capacity. Some communities are completely underserved as is. Some don't even have hospitals and have to travel long distances, but they're already kind of full with the normal caseload that you would have. These are people with car accidents and heart attacks and broken legs and all the things that just happen as part of life. And to throw on top of that a 100, 200, 300, 400, 500% increase in serious patients, that swamps the system and leads to very bad outcomes. And when you get very bad outcomes, I think that your case fatality rates all change a lot. So the Diamond Princess, if this is the real number and we're honing in on a case fatality rate down there, if that's accurate, these people got the very, very best of care. Of course, in a swamp system, you're going to get much, much less care, and who knows what that ends up looking like. All right. I'm still in the SARS stage of all this, which is sell all rallies. Big rallies yesterday, big declines today, just giant volatility coming in. So as of the time I'm recording this, and when I screen grabbed this, we saw the S&P down 122 and the Dow down 1,000. It was up 1,100 yesterday. But the big news to me is this. OPEC came out today and they announced a 1.5 million barrel per day cut in production. Oil barely popped $1 and then lost all of that and more. So that's really big news, because 1.5 million barrel per day cut is enormous, and that should have really stoked oil, and oil didn't even respond. So the oil markets are saying we need to see more of a cut before we're willing to entertain the idea that oil can go back up in price. OPEC, of course, trying to get the price up by doing the cut, because, this is an unsustainable price. And by the way, the U.S. shale industry just gets clubbed, just gets slaughtered at this level. Nobody's making money at that level. So, and that's a super highly leveraged, indebted industry as is. So this is a tough case right here for the U.S. shale business, but global oil in general, this is a tough business to be in at that price. All right. Why does that matter? Well, because the oil is the most tightly linked to the economy, and I've got a report about this at Peak Prosperity right now. If you want to read more about that, I am tracking the economic impacts of this because I think they're going to be really bad. This is going to be really hard. I think there's the potential for another financial accident crisis like the Great Financial Crisis. Gold is certainly signaling something here. And by the way, this decline was with the Federal Reserve performing overnight operations where it threw in $87 billion of overnight money and a 14 days operation, meaning they're putting money out for 14 days. They threw another $20 billion in there, and it was oversubscribed by $52 billion. So that's your clue right there that something is not right in the markets, this is an arcane part of the market. I know if you came here for health and coronavirus, you're like, what is he talking about this for? Because this is a really critical part of our financial system that if this seizes up and breaks and goes into some sort of conniption, then this is going to impact everybody's lives just as much as the virus, I think. All right, that means that they threw $107 billion into the markets last night. The markets wanted $52 billion more, and still this happened. Not a good sign. And here's what we're seeing with this. Maybe I'm not too surprised by this. The financial life insurance, I've been tracking this because I'm wondering, are the life insurance companies going to take a hit for a couple of reasons? One, when interest rates are really falling, they tend to make a lot of their money in their portfolios by matching long-term liabilities against current income, which they get in some cases from interest rates. So as interest rates fall, it makes it tough. But is the market starting to sniff out? These are huge declines, by the way, 7, 8, 9%. Is the market starting to sniff out that life insurance policies are going to be a problem here? I'm wondering about that as well. What was I tracking in 2008 when I was talking about the financial accident coming and the great financial crisis? I was tracking a lot of the financial money center banks, and they're doing much worse than the general market today. Look at this, 8% down, right? Those are big, big declines. And then Euro stocks, this is the banking index over there, getting this from Bianco Research. They really were doing pretty well with all the money printing that was happening with the central banks, but this is just an absolute crushing decline right here. That's astonishing. All the way back to the lows that they were hitting back here. So financial crisis is afoot. These are the sorts of things I'm looking at where, again, I'm out here in the cheap seats just like you, so I got to read the tea leaves. And this is where I go. These are my tea leaves. I'm looking at specific areas of the financial system which I think are most exposed. But this is, if you want to keep a journal, because this is history happening right now. TF Metals, at TF Metals here, I follow them. My friend Craig is proprietor of that place over there. Look at this. I'm not sure there are words in the English language to properly describe this. This is the United States 2-year bond. And this is astonishing. I've never seen anything like this, declining just from the middle of February, just over the past couple of weeks here, from 1.4% rate of interest down to 0.562. It's just absolutely astonishing what's happening here. And this is, of course, big money saying we need to be in bonds. We're going to be in bonds because we don't like what we're seeing out here in equities. We don't want to be exposed out here to equities at this point in time. So it looks like big money is fleeing into gold and into bonds right here. Again, tea leaves. We're just reading them here. I think it just got personal for the bankers, and this may explain part of the decline today because it's never real until it hits you. You know, they say a recession is when your neighbor loses their job and a depression is when you lose your job. When does it get personal? Well, it got personal for HSBC, the big bank, when it had to evacuate a trading floor because of the coronavirus. The bank cleared out its entire research department and parts of the trading floor after a research analyst was believed to have contracted the virus. Financial News said the HSBC, this was in their bank's 45-story skyscraper in the Docklands. So London is starting to get hit here, but this is right in the heart of it, right? This is, in one of the large 45-story bank skyscrapers. And this comes a day after workers at accounting giant Deloitte were sent home from its London offices after a colleague tested positive for coronavirus following a trip to Asia. So again, this the honey badger virus, it doesn't know any social restrictions. It doesn't care about your belief systems. It doesn't care how much money you have, right? And also, it's just the flu, right? So here we, this was taken off of that new cruise ship that's parked off of the Grand Princess there off the coast of California, up near San Francisco. This person filmed 2 Black Hawk helicopters coming in to deliver the test kits. So remind me the last time this wouldn't have been a Coast Guard function with little those red and orange, white coasty helicopters. When was the last time we saw United States Marine Corps Blackhawks delivering test kits? Okay. As well, not the flu. Remember, this was back in January 25th. So this was one of the first things that made me go, uh-oh, this is not the flu. We really got to get out in front of this. And it was, this should have been everybody's first, soon as you see this emergency construction of a massive hospital like this by China, that's all you need to know, that this isn't the flu. It's not just the flu. So really anybody who's still comparing this to the flu at this point is either hopelessly stuck in their own inability to process their emotional state around this, or they are actively lying to us at this stage. I don't know. I don't like either of those particular options. All right. Not the flu, not SARS, by the way. All of these things in here, we're starting to see things like this really get tested in the media. They're starting to, I saw something in Bloomberg today, which quoted a Chinese person saying that the longest incubation period that had been documented was 14 days, really justifying that 14-day quarantine. But I saved all the original case studies that came out. So I've got a rash of them. And maybe those original ones were wrong, and I'm willing to change my position on this if I see new data. But I need something more than an assertion by a Chinese doctor saying that this is wrong. I need to see the data before I'm willing to change mine. So I've got data that says the incubation period is that long, but I haven't seen any data otherwise. All right, my conclusions for today. I really think there's a major financial crisis afoot. I think we're seeing it right here. These are the things I'm reading. I don't need any more signs. To me, when I see things that look like this, that's the same as me seeing this. Again, I could be wrong, but I'm just showing you what I follow and how I follow it. China, not even being remotely honest about what's going on then or now. I think that's a very high chance that they have many more cases than they are referring to. It's, just by way of example, I read recently that Beijing reported it had 11 cases, but all 11 of those came from just one case cluster in one building. And that's it, really. The whole city only had 11 cases, and they all came from one cluster that got reported out. And is that why Beijing is still pretty much in complete lockdown? Nah, no. Beijing would not be in lockdown if there were virtually no cases there and there was nothing to worry about. That ratio of the recovered to the dead, that's concerning, and we're going to have to watch that and track that as it goes on. I think that begins to give us a little bit of a clue about what's going on in this larger sense right here. So these numbers, we're going to keep tracking them and watching them because we're ultimately going to get towards a case fatality rate. Anything over 2%, remember, gets us into what's considered to be a category 5 situation where everything that's going to happen in terms of the non-pharmaceutical interventions is going to be keyed off of a case fatality rate that's higher than 2%. All right, and let's see, where did I move that to? What are my conclusions? Hold on, I just lost my conclusion slide. It accidentally got shuffled somewhere. Oh, it's all the way back down here. Data continues to support the idea that Italy and Iran have a far more deadly strain of the virus. I'm going to stick by that, just based on things like looking at the actual case fatality rate, things that are starting to perk up here. This, for Italy in particular, this concerns me a lot. This right here, that number, that makes me feel very insecure. Also, the way in which the Italian cases spread all over the world so rapidly. It's a highly virulent and seems to be maybe more deadly strain than perhaps South Korea is dealing with. Don't know early data. Don't hold me to that. But that's just the way the data is stacking up right now. I think the United States is just a few weeks back in the story. Case, cluster. We're right there. The boom stage comes next. So with that, I just want to remind everybody, just got another person saying today that, YouTube unsubscribed me from the channel. I'm getting a couple emails that say the same thing. If you've been unsubscribed from this channel, just resubscribe. So just check and make sure that you are subscribed. That way you'll be sure to get the latest update notification when it comes out. All right. With that, thank you for listening, everybody. We'll be back talking to you tomorrow.
Hi folks, Adam Taggart here. Chris Martinson and I are the co-founders of Peak Prosperity. If you want to get alerted whenever we release a new video from Chris, just click the red subscribe button right beneath the YouTube video player. Once you've done that, a little bell icon will appear right next to it. Click on that bell. It looks like this. And that's it. The next time we publish a video from Chris, you'll immediately receive a notification from YouTube. Thanks for watching our videos.